Hi, this is Hilbert Copeland discussing Module 13. Uh, this is my reflective vlog discussing barriers to change on behalf of client and on behalf of social worker when confronted with conflicts of interest. So in Module 13, uh, it's made really clear that at certain times during this profession, in the midst of completing micro practice, that patients will be hesitant or obstinately defiant against change. Um, Hepworth et al. Share 3 different strategies to help kind of eliminate the barriers that our clients experience when trying to make positive changes or go through with some of the tasks that will lead them to the goals that they established with their worker. So the 3 most common techniques that are used are additive empathy, interpretation, and confrontation. I think that the 2 most important tools that are used to help eliminate these barriers to progress include additive empathy and confrontation. The reason I don't select to further discuss interpretation is that really interpretation becomes a part of additive empathy, and it also becomes a part of confrontation. So with additive empathy, it's a vital tool to work through opposition to change because the process first requires effective sharing, followed by self-awareness, followed by mental flexibility on part of the worker. A worker must move beyond attentiveness to the experience of the client, but they also must then begin to be sensitive to the conditions, struggles, and the resources of each account. So it's not enough in terms of additive empathy to simply say, I understand the situation you were in, or I feel some kind of emotional uh, sensation based on what you've shared with me, but rather the social worker also has to be sensitive to what were the conditions in this scenario? What were they experiencing? What was the client struggling with? What made things so difficult? And then what kind of resources did they have? What were they able to rely on in this time that they're sharing, in this experience that they're sharing? Additive empathy usually helps to expand the client's self-awareness. It also helps to cushion confrontation. So in the instance that whether or not a client experiences self-confrontation at the behest of their worker or assertive confrontation, it gives them the propensity to say, okay, I understand that this is about actions and circumstances versus my humanity or who I am as a person. So I think what's really interesting about additive empathy is that it builds onto the concept or the ethical principle that we keep every client's dignity intact and we allow them the opportunity to see their worth. Sometimes additive empathy can also be responsible for resolving poor relational reactions. So that understanding that runs deeper than the situation, but also to the many facets of it and what the client has experienced, can really open in ways to conversations that might have been difficult to have prior. Additive empathy really requires the worker to go beyond the exact expression of information given by the client. It requires, and this is where I think interpretation and additive empathy are so closely related that they're essentially almost 2 parts of the same continuum of the same practice, which is that a social worker has to make some level of interpretation, of formulation in their brain of what's happened to really provide that additive empathy. Without that kind of interpretation, it's hard to make that additive empathy or just that empathy additive without the interpretation. Then we have the practice of confrontation. So confrontation is really meant to enhance self-awareness and hopefully traditionally it prompts and promotes change. from the client. So one of the things with confrontation that practitioners have to be aware of is the conversation of individual rights versus social justice and what role that might play in whatever situation it is that they're confronting their client about. One of the more specific techniques for this kind of confrontation includes motivational interviewing. So the social worker takes responsibility for pursuing a positive atmosphere for change based on accurate empathic understanding, mutual trust, acceptance, and understanding of the world from the offender's perspective. Then what they do with that information, with this motivational interviewing, is they make sure that their client understands, hey, this is not about who you are as a person, again, back to dignity, but rather it's about choices that you made, actions that you've perpetuated, the effects that your actions have had on others. There's also different styles of this confrontation. One, a social worker can lead their client to do some self-confrontation. So Hepworth et al. Shares a really apt example, which is instead of asking a client, are you powerless to alcohol? You might instead say, do you ever experience blackouts from alcohol consumption? How often do you not remember the night before? How much money do you spend on alcohol? Asking lots of questions that pertain to the subject without making a direct assault on the client. And I think what I appreciate so much about this strategy is that if you are a emotionally adept and attuned person, if you are by nature pretty empathetic, you probably already ask questions in this way. So for me, this is really almost second nature, which I really appreciate because so much of what we're asked to do really takes cognition, it takes thoughtfulness, it takes practice, it takes development. But motivational interviewing, this self-confrontation strategy, I love it because it's something I've used my entire life. And it's almost Socratic in a way. Then the next question, discuss your ability to recognize and assess behavior as well as use of self in working through opposition to change throughout the helping process. So I interpret this question to ask, as a social worker, or as a future social worker, how do I combat the issues that keep me from helping to facilitate meaningful change for my client? And really, Hepworth et al. Offers 3 strategies that one should really use and account for when they're having this problem. First, self-exploration. What are my expectations of the world? What does my culture lead me to believe? What do I think is right and wrong? And once I've done that exploration, develop a real awareness of it. How does it fit into the culture at large? How does it fit into the culture of my community? How does it fit into my understanding of my clients? Do we share the same feelings? Do we share the same values? If not, how do I gear my understanding to meet their needs? Also control, right? Social workers have to have a level of control over their emotions, over their feelings, over the execution of these therapeutic approaches that are meant to help our clients. So there is a balancing act that occurs here where a social worker cannot help but be composed of all of their experiences, just like any other person. But they do have to go a step further and say, I understand this about myself. I see this about myself, and I understand how it could be a detriment to the helping practice that I'm trying to give to this client. So I think that that's a really important component of micro practice. And I know for myself personally, I'm going to have to continue to work on my inherent biases, just like everybody. I also have navigated the world from a place of some privilege, right? White, male, cisgendered. And so how do my perceptions differ from the clientele that I'll be working with? This reflective log has truly been the most thought-provoking because it is now asking, as a social worker, what are your blind spots? And I think that's something that we could all pay a little more attention to. I'm Hilbert Copeland. This was the reflective vlog for module 13. Thank you.